Hi, everyone. It's a treat to be here. I feel like sitting here not only as a scientific advisory council member, but like many of you, as someone who has struggled with his mental health, someone who has a family with many different mental health challenges. And so it's a real treat to be among family in a place where we can be open. We wanted to speak and focus on male mental health. And in some ways, following April, I really want to draw on her strength. When I think about so many men and the struggle they have to be open without having to fight for a bathroom or for rights. That said, male mental health is in a horrible shape. About 70 to 80% of all completed suicides are men. Often they're men with seemingly everything that one would want. We know that there aren't any real programs to help us confront or think about male mental health in America, unlike the wonderful women's mental health departments that so many of my colleagues in psychiatry and psychology man and women and help us understand the peculiarities and specificities of women's mental health. Same thing doesn't exist for male mental health. The idea of what makes a good man, what makes a mentally healthy man, what makes a good father, these aren't the things that really are taught to young men. How do we talk about our feelings? How are we allies? How do we do so many of the things that men need to do today? And so it's a real treat that Bring Change to Mind has an interest in this, because when we think about where young adolescent men today are, as we saw in the video, they're talking in a new way, more openly than I've ever seen in 20 years of treating patients. They are interested in emotional depth, they're interested in their inner worlds, and they're interested in talking about it. And I think we have a huge opportunity to seize on that, interest and curiosity about their inner worlds and about modern masculinity. And I think we can define it as something that's going to serve all of us. So I think men and people who identify in masculine ways can do the best of what that offers, as opposed to so often what has happened via masculinity, which is not generally good stuff. I think there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. That's why it's a treat to sit here with Sara and to think about all of her work with organizations that you might not think of as being very savvy and thinking about really pushing mental health and mental fitness to the limits. So I want to hear with you about your work. I think the last thing just to add is that over the past 3 years, I've been working with Men's Health Magazine and a colleague, Greg Scott Brown, to have conversations about male mental health called Friday Sessions. It's on their Instagram page. There are now over 70 conversations about male mental health, ranging from the U.S. Surgeon General to Andy Dunn, a CEO with bipolar disorder, speaking openly about that, to a number of artists, athletes, all talking about their mental health problems. When you hear young Jeezy talk about his first session for his panic disorder, right? It does something to change the conversation. And so I invite you to take a look at that. And I want to, Sara, hear all about your work with the Navy SEALs and with many high-performance athletes.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew, and thank you for everyone being here and just participating in the conversation, which I think is important to continue having. So I serve as an embedded performance and clinical psychologist. I've been doing this work in a male-dominated environment for the last 20 years. I worked with the NFL at the league office. I was the embedded team psychologist for the New York Jets and the Brooklyn Nets. And now after that, I transitioned to working with the Navy and high-performance naval special warfare in Coronado, and now with the Clippers and the Kings. I'm actually with the hockey team. So lots of testosterone, lots of, environments where, to be honest, having these conversations are pretty challenging. It's a group that has been, told that they have to be the strongest and fittest and most alpha, if you will, in their world. A lot of their family lean on them. They look to them for advice and guidance. They have a very short window for their success in their career. So there's a lot of pressure and stress. And they're, put in a position where they can't look weak, what they perceive to show any weakness. They also face a lot of injury, right, in terms of what they're putting their body through, both from their physical body, but also head injuries. At least in the NFL, that was a very significant issue. And in hockey, it will be. I'm relatively newer to that sport. Some of the injury list I look at, I just can't believe what these guys go through. Lacerations to the face, a puck to the throat, and they're expected to just kind of get taped up and go back in. So to have conversations about what it feels like to be lonely or to be hurting or to be sad, to have a significant other pass away suddenly, that, you know, they experience trauma in the middle of a season. These are conversations that we are trying to move forward. So a lot of the leagues have mandated essentially that there's a clinical person available to each of the teams, and the NBA and the NFL and the MLB. Those are something that's non-negotiable. When I first started working in NBA, I had one player who he suffered a very significant injury that almost ended his career. And he had a hard time psychologically kind of not wanting to hurt himself like that again, to the point where he might not, I mean, they told him they might have to amputate his leg. That's the severity of his injury. So obviously, psychologically, it was very anxiety producing to come back and try to push his body to certain limits. And he told the trainer that he needed to talk, and the trainer connected him with me. And he was so worried about being seen with me that he would say, okay, Sara, you go to this room, and then you go in, and I'll wait like 10 minutes, and then I'll do a special knock on the door, and then I'll come in. And we had to orchestrate it so that he did not feel there was anyone in the locker room that would see him reaching out for help or talking to me, essentially. And fast forward now to this past year, I actually was able to ask the LA Kings to do a checkup from the neck up with every player that came back from the off season. When they went to see their eye doctor, or they saw their orthopedic, they saw the medical, they also saw me. And every single player sat down to kind of check in on how are you doing neck up, right? How are you feeling? What's going on with you? Is there anything going on with your family? Is there anything that you're worried about? And we had a conversation, and I was amazed. I was really waiting for the resistance to come of like, why are we doing this? Or, you know, why are you asking me these questions? And not one of the players had a problem with it. They were like, oh, cool. That's cool. And they filled out the little form, and we sat and talked. And they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. After we finished that, I texted every single one of them to say, it was great to meet you. You know, here's my information. And at least a handful reached out to say, hey, can I talk to you? I'd really like to set up an appointment. My wife is struggling. You know, we just moved here from Sweden. Is there any chance, you know, you could help her? So being able to find ways where we normalize the checking in seems to be a very powerful way to get men in a room to kind of talk and be able to know that that's something they can do and that they can actually find relief from, and, you know, move themselves into a place that feels a little bit more supported and healthy. The other thing with the Clippers that I asked this year, that they fortunately introduced me to the team, even though I've been there for 3 or 4 seasons now. And I asked if the head coach could say a few words, because what I find with men is if they have another man that they look up to, that they respect, that gives them permission and says, yes, this is important and this matters, they will allow themselves the equal permission to say, yeah, okay, cool, right? Like other men who I respect and look up to, who have been through the battles and who I see as a warrior, are open to do this, then I am too. And that really helped with the kind of opening the door. So I think there's ways in which we can have, as you said, other people talk about when it's somebody who's been through it and they have a real genuine experience. It just normalizes that I can be a very successful person, I can accomplish a lot, but I still can need help and I still can need guidance. So thank you for, you know, this, and I'm going to turn it back to Drew for a summary and introductions.
Thank you so much for that. And I think what we see is when there's access to a conversation, people are open to it. And I think it's where Bring Change to Mind mission to put people into rooms. I've been a therapist for 22 years now, and it's just always struck me how much humans love to connect. And when we feel just the faintest glimmer of interest and curiosity combined with safety, we share what's going on with one another, and we heal one another. And what I love about Sara's work is how it poses this notion that I believe in. I think I'm here sitting with you today because of good treatment, not because I'm a successful man. I think I became a successful man through getting help. And when I think about all these men and women in a notion of exploration of the self, and that this is a journey that we're all on together, and that we walk arm in arm in a preventative way to get ahead of these issues as opposed to shamefully seeking me out, I just think that's where we want to be as a country and as a culture. So it's a treat to be with you all.